2023 video gonna be getting from me is another Loudest vs Casagrandes video involving sports. Mainly the Loudest lot and the Casagrandes launch shot. One of the reasons why I'm comparing these two episodes with each other is because the main characters Lincoln and Carlota aren't into sports, especially when it comes to Carlota. Like, granted, there's a loophole onto how that she's into sports, but we're gonna get to that later. Rita wants Lincoln to get some exercise instead of playing video games in his room. And to be perfectly honest, the fact that she signs Lincoln up to become a football player really goes to show that she really wants Lincoln to get some exercise in any other sport. But considering that Lincoln's attributes have nothing to do with sports, unlike Lynn, really goes to show that he really is an indoor person, even though that sometimes when he does stuff outside, it's mostly hanging out with his friends or his sisters. When it comes to the launch shot, Carlota needs a PE credit in order to graduate high school. She needs to find the perfect sport for her while Ryan helps her out. Considering that Carlota's goal is a lot more important compared to Lincoln's, considering that Carlota is in high school while Lincoln was in elementary school in season 1, it's mostly a lose-lose situation for Carlota. And believe me when I say this, for a person who is obsessed with fashion and vlogging, it really goes to show that sports just aren't really her thing. And while she may work out when it comes to lifting weights, keep in mind, when people lift weights, they don't usually get into sports. They just mostly exercise for the most, when it comes to being healthy and somewhat. The fact that I saw the synopsis involving Carlota trying to find a PE credit, all the while that none of the sports aren't her thing, goes to show that she is mostly similar to Lincoln's situation when it comes to him not being into sports. And trust me, I'm gonna get into those details much more later. Getting back into the Loudest episode, Lincoln needs to deal with the fact that he needs to be a football player in front of Rita by faking that he went to football by having Lynn taking his role while he just stays by a tree reading his comics or playing video games. If I'm gonna be perfectly honest, one of the major highlights from this episode is Lincoln's relationship with Lynn, since that this is the closest that Lynn is being nice to him, even though that she was too into being a football player to the point that Lincoln needs to perform in front of a crowd against the other school's team. And yet at the same time, I really felt like Lynn's situation in this is that she is a diehard when it comes to sports. To be real with you, before No Such Luck, this was the episode where we actually get to see the bonding relationship between Lincoln and Lynn for the right reasons. Granted, every time that they change back with Lincoln being in the football uniform while Lynn gets out of the uniform, she kept throwing mud at his face in order to show that Lincoln did win through the football experience, even though that it's just mostly Lynn picking on him, even if it's mostly for the convenience. And since that this episode centers around Lynn being into football while also having competition with the opponent's team with Hank and Hawk, which were the same characters that I discussed in the Halloween episode, I got a feeling that if we did had a Lynn episode centering around football, we would have had this episode rather than Lincoln trying out football for exercise episode. And considering that this is season 1 we're talking about, you really need to expect Lincoln Loud being the focus rather than the sisters or Lincoln's friends being the major focus. Getting back to the Casagrandes, when Ryan notices that Carlota is into basketball, she records it, and as you can tell, she's really into basketball, but not at all. I know it's difficult to believe that after watching this episode, but hear me out. In the gym where she's paired up with other basketball players, she failed miserably. unlike before, and one of the reasons why is because she didn't like wearing the uniforms that she was forced to put on during PE sessions. Mainly the basketball uniforms. And this just screams saving face while Ryan and Sid stole Bianca's mask that in her wrestling persona she can't be able to wrestle without her real mask. If anything, this show desperately wants to throw in Mexican material all over it, knowing full well that when it comes to wrestling or even any other sport, there's always a passion when it comes to costumes. Though then again, Lincoln needs to be in a costume in order to be in disguise in front of his parents. If anything, Lincoln wouldn't even have a passion when it comes to costumes unlike Lenny does. And to be perfectly honest, if Lenny was a football player, I'm pretty sure that she will probably be in the same scenario as Carlota was in the launch shot. But in all seriousness, remember I say that Carlota isn't into any sports, which also includes basketball? I really meant it, because regardless of what you think about Carlota, if the Casagrandes did get a 4th season and she's wearing her fashion outfit rather than the gym uniforms, then people will probably mistaken her as a basketball player if it wasn't without her outfits. And to be perfectly real with you, if she was forced to be into the outfit that she doesn't want to be in under strict rules, then she won't be able to go anywhere in sports related. To the point that Lynn will probably beat her completely when it comes to any other sports competition. This may be an over-exaggeration, but if Carlota were in her fashion uniforms by doing the other sports, she would have succeeded. Believe me when I say this. When she's into fashion, the same levels as Lenny, and the fact that she failed at basketball similar to how she failed in the other sports, it would be a lot more believable to think that she would be able to do all those previous sports right. Yes, it may be an over-exaggeration if you completely look at how she performed in the other sports when it comes to not looking at the big picture, but the fact that she complains about the uniforms really goes to show that any other sport is for her if she's wearing the right uniforms without any restrictions. I'm gonna be real with you, the fact that this just screams Mexican representation when it comes to Mexican people wearing the outfits that they want to wear might be a sign of what Mexican people do when it comes to doing sports like what Carlota did in this episode. I'm just saying, since that we're in the 2020s, even if it's mostly for personal reasons, that's what I'm thinking when it comes to people doing different sports all around the world. Granted, there are new ways to make episodes centering around these types of character traits, but keep in mind, I've seen a lot worse, and this isn't one of them. When it comes to Lincoln's motivations in the Loudest yard, I don't usually blame him. I mean, you can make the argument that he put himself in this position when it comes to being part of a football game in front of a crowd, including his family. But considering that it's been addressed that he doesn't exercise or into any sports whatsoever, he will probably be the least helpful in the entire team. And it's actually saying a lot knowing that the other team is bigger than the team that Lincoln's in. Seriously, it would have been a lot more, it would have been difficult to have both teams equal instead of just having the opposite team being stronger. I'm starting to convince that these cliches really need to be changed because it's really becoming a lot more predictable the more I just see the heroes team, which is the good team, being mostly normal football players, and when it comes to the opposite team, it's always going to be stronger football players. If you ask me, it's honestly a miracle that Lincoln's team ended up being close to winning against all odds. I just think that at this point, I'd rather just see both teams equally instead of just having the other team being stronger compared to the other team. Let's go talk about the ending of this episode. Well, Lincoln decides to join in after Lin got injured, and he just made the entire team lose because he went to the opposite side of the football field. If you ask me, the fact that this isn't the answer that Rita is looking for when it comes to Lincoln getting some exercise, then I don't know what is. But to be honest with you, as much as that this ending is supposed to be an indication that Lincoln is totally not in the zone when it comes to sports or exercise, it's honestly unbelievable to think that a season later, Lin and Rita need to get some exercise because they kept eating junk food, while Lincoln is just basically Rita, which is basically the role reversal. At this point, I can't even side with anyone if they're gonna be hypocrites or the fact that they have mood swings. That's how much I don't usually side with the parents in the Loudest Lodge, because they just ended up becoming hypocrites or having mood swings in Health Kicked. I really don't even know where to side anymore. In all honesty, this episode isn't terrible, it's just aged poorly when it comes to future episodes, but in my opinion, the Casagrandes launch shot is a better episode than this. Mainly the fact that nowadays, this episode can be instantly overshadowed when it comes to other episodes, and while yes, there are moments here and there that are actually good and somewhat humorous, it didn't change the fact that the launch shot is basically a better sports episode than this. There may be a few details that may be questionable when it comes to the launch shot, but considering that 6 years later, well, they made a sports episode involving the Casagrandes that is actually entertaining, and also a good send-off to Carlota before the Casagrandes came to an end, I would say that this is pretty much one of the better Carlota episodes I've seen from the Casagrandes. And before any of you asks, one of the reasons why I didn't compare this episode to the Lin basketball episode, which is Net Games, is because that episode was an actual basketball episode. Well, Lin was being in the zone of basketball and she wasn't completely distracted or not out of her element when it comes to the uniforms. And the major focus of that episode is because she was focusing on Victorious, and the fact that she was the better basketball player than her team is really saying that she was in the zone much more than her teammates. And believe me when I say this, the ending, well, she was completely alright with losing, and the fact that she's being nicer to the other teammates, then I'm going to guarantee you that if Lin actually had competition with Carlota, it had to be one-on-one and not a team against team. Because to be perfectly honest, Lin tried to find team members outside of Royal Woods, and in all honesty, it just didn't work out for her. And there is another comparison when it comes to Carlota trying to get something in order to succeed, and that's one of the Lisa episodes. Well, Lisa needs to friend someone in order to get an A on friendship or something. But at the same time, sports versus friendship don't usually fit together. It just feels an awkward comparison. And one of the major reasons onto why that these two episodes are similar, especially with its main characters, is because obviously both episodes were aired in September, with the Loudest Lodge airing in 2016, with this airing in 2022. Lincoln and Carlota get instantly distracted when it comes to doing anything sports related or anything at all. No kidding, that's actually the truth if you actually watch Undivided Attention. And like I said earlier, when Lincoln made a touchdown to the opposite side of the field in the launch shot, Carlota threw the basketball through the net on the opposite side of the basketball field. Am I literally the only one who found that suspicious that Lincoln and Carlota are related when it comes to sports, as in not being into sports? all the while that both shows are having a difficult time developing YN's character instead of just being a female version of Lincoln, is where I don't take her seriously completely. I mean, don't get me wrong, she has a few good episodes, especially better ones, but at the same time, when it comes to normal episodes, well, she's being portrayed as the opposite as she was in the earlier seasons of the Loud House, not because she was a bully, I mean as a tough girl, really goes to show that it's difficult to look at her character in her own spin-off than what she was in the earlier seasons. Let me tell you, as much as I critique the idea of YN's character in Save the Date episode, it doesn't change the fact that she was mostly a tough character despite being a bully. And if anything, I'd rather just see her as a tough character in the spin-off, even if it may not be appealing to Loud House fans. It would at least separate the spin-off itself from the main series. That way, I wouldn't be able to find details involving Lincoln and Carlota being related when it comes to not being into sports. And when it comes to the fandom itself, I'm gonna be perfectly honest. The idea of Lincoln shipping with an older character, regardless if it's physical or non-physical, it just really goes to show that they actually see those shippings a healthier ship than Lincoln and YN, because no one is going to forget the development involving YN in the earlier seasons, no matter how you ignore it. And with this show not making up its mind on whether it wants to pair Lincoln with a girl of his age is really saying something. And don't even get me started on the live action version, because for me personally, it's honestly a lose-lose situation regardless. And at this point, it doesn't even matter whether you ship Lincoln with an older character or even a longer character, because there was literally no focus when it comes to Lincoln having romantic feelings with a character of his age. And if you want more proof onto why Lincoln and YN are never going to be together, regardless of Loie and Bobby possibly getting married, making it canon, is the fact in the horoscope, YN is concerned that Lincoln might propose to her, and as it turns out, it was mostly Lincoln's magic trick. It's honestly a good episode, but considering that this is more of an indication that Lincoln is gonna remain single when it comes to canon, then I guess the fandom can instantly ship him with any other woman, regardless of age gaps. But with that being said, the Casagrandes launch shot gets a 7.5 out of 10, while the Loud House's The Loudest Loud gets a 5.5 out of 10. Let's just hope that there's at least another Casagrandes episode centering around YN that is superior to a Lincoln Loud episode. Believe me, it's gonna happen sooner or later.